Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkin, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. I am Amber Larkin, your host, and today I have with me Sabrina Fisher. I met Sabrina through a mutual friend. She's a women's empowerment advocate, I can say truthfully, and just an amazing human. And we're going to get into her story. She has a very impactful story and very brave to share it with us. But Sabrina, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So it's funny because we were just talking before we jumped on or started recording, how we kind of met through a mutual friend, and we just kind of had some interactions through different business stuff. And then I made this post about this place that was getting broken down here in Tennessee, and they were like demolishing this place, and looked like a wasteland. I was like, I need to photograph in this place. Like, it's so amazing. And for those of you who don't know, I have these transformation through trauma sessions that just kind of tells metaphorically the stories of people's trauma and then their triumph. And I was like, I need to shoot somebody in this place before they tear it completely down and rebuild there. So I made a post, and Sabrina writes me this description of why this fits her story so perfectly. It's like, oh my God, we got to shoot there. The rest is history. You can go onto my social media and see her amazing photos. And now here we are. We're getting ready to get into her story, which is super impactful. So first of all, let me just ask you, what were your thoughts about shooting at this place? I know we went back and forth with some of the creative. What were your thoughts? And then I want to get into your story and how this kind of connects to your story.
It was so crazy that you made the post about, all this rubble and rubbish, this is going to be perfect. Because I don't think at that point you had seen a previous post that I had done.
I didn't.
But, and it was even before I made it public knowledge, that I announced what I went through, that I had said something about going through things. And my exact description in my post that's on my page was, I feel like the world was set out to break me this year. And if I'm going to be 100% honest, it did. It broke me into a million pieces. And I said, but this time that I'm broken, because I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, I said, this time I'm going to heal differently. I told myself that I was going to sit there with every single piece of brokenness and pick up every piece, even the pieces that are going to be like glass that would cut me and hurt me. But I'm going to hold them, and I'm going to love them and understand them and process them, because they're still a piece of who I am and what I've been through. And I was going to understand every piece of me before I put me back together again, so I could put my best version of myself back together. So when I saw that picture or that post that you did in your story, I was like, oh my God, it's my life in a picture, because I really feel like a wrecking ball came through and just shattered everything that I was doing, from work to, relationships to, me and my son's mental health, just everything. I feel like everything that I'd built had gotten knocked down, but everything that I've overcome in life, and if anybody ever knows me or has known me to do things, is the one thing with me is I'm always gonna overcome. But this year was just really hard, and it put me in a whole new mindset to have to take several steps back and even stay to myself. It was one of those things that I needed to be alone to heal, which was really hard because I'm a very vocal and transparent person. And I didn't have the bandwidth to include many people to go through this journey with me at the beginning this year. I know that some people that are familiar with me or friends or close to me, they didn't know what I was going through. So hopefully the friendships are good enough that now that they know why we're so distant, that it doesn't damage or hurt the relationship. In my opinion, if it did, then they weren't a true friend to begin with.
I believe that as human beings, we all go through something. Like, everybody has trauma, things that they've gone through that has, broken them down in some type of way. But your situation was very literal because it has to do with abuse and physical. And you and I talked when we did the photo shoot, and you were telling me that it was both, that there was situations where it was physical abuse, and then there was situations where there was mental abuse as well. And abuse on any level is hard and difficult, and it does for anyone who's ever been in a situation like that, can totally relate to the feeling of being completely shattered, broken apart. Talk to us a little bit about what that looked like, what your experience was, and how that impacted you.
So we're just going to reference the individual as Prince Charming, right? Because after my divorce, I was single for almost 5 years, 4 or 5 years, because I'm very protective, right? And I want to make sure that whoever comes into my life is healthy for me and my son. And this individual came into my life, and he was, in my eyes, like a real life Prince Charming, like a unicorn. It's almost like I was so mesmerized by everything that he did, that was everything that I ever desired and didn't think was possible, that it made me turn my head to certain situations, but I was aware of them. So things were always good. Like, he was not like physically abusive the whole time, but there would be little instances that something small would happen, and his responses, they weren't like rage. They were the opposite. They were shutdown effects. Like, he would withhold affection or conversation, or, would withhold conversation from me, meaning me saying, hey, I saw something that you posted a long time ago, or like maybe last year, that, healing through something is really hard. And I would ask, like, what did you go through? And he would never talk about it, which right then should have been like a number one red flag to me. But I've also been that person that's been hurt before and going through things. And sometimes it's just not easy to talk about. And I understand that. But there would be small instances that would happen that would not deem the response that it would get. I mean, like emotional breakdowns, tears, crying. And I'm just kind of confused. I'm like, what is happening? I don't understand. It even got to the point where he said that he needed help, right? And it was emotional, or it was emotional trauma from the past, from him, from something. But I never knew what. And honestly, still to this day, I don't know what it was. There was even a conversation at one point that me and his sister were having, and she even said that she believed he needed therapy too, because of, the upbringing and just relationships with family, that she believed that he needed therapy, because she could see it too.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, he's like, I need help. And I encouraged him. I was like, look, because during my day job, I work with mental health and substance abuse for the state of Tennessee. So I understand. I don't look down on anybody for that. If anything, I encourage people to go to counseling. I think every human it should be mandatory, like, everybody needs a safe place to talk. And I encouraged him to look with his job, and his job did cover the sessions like most places do. The 5 free sessions a year, or however many your job will cover. That was probably a little over a month before the actual incident happened. And so he told me, and I was like, okay, great. And I even told him, I was like, I'm going to go too. And he's like, well, I want you to go with me. I want to do it like a couples thing. I'm like, no, we're not there yet. Like, we both as individuals need to make sure that we're addressing our own individual things, because I'm not perfect, right? Like, every person has their own faults and just healing journeys. So I was going to go as well. So I'll put a pin in it right there. But, we had even taken trips, and he had broken up with me a few times. I know that sounds crazy, but when he would break up, he's like, I don't deserve you. Like, I'm not worthy. Right. And it would just be these things, and I'm like, I don't understand what is happening. So that's, again, there were incidents like that would happen. But some of these incidents happened when he was drinking too, that he didn't really recall much of the conversations the next day. There was only like maybe 3 times that stuff like that happened, but alcohol really did play a factor in it. So, an incident had happened right before I went out of town on vacation. It wasn't a big incident. It was more so like me just trying to do something special for him. His response to it, it's not what I expected, which, again, expectations versus reality, it's not there, but it was a very shutdown. And to me, it was almost like he was just withdrawing himself because he wasn't going on the trip with me. So I don't know if that made him feel like I was leaving him, even though it was just for a vacation. But, the way things panned out before I left, I told him, I was like, I think we need a week, this whole week, to not really talk. I was like, we both really need to think about what we want out of this relationship, what's healthy, what we're willing to compromise and work on together. Is it worth it? And like, what are you willing to do? So I came back and my son had to be with me. He wasn't able to go to his father's that weekend as originally planned. And when I came back, that next morning, he wanted to talk. And I was like, I really don't want to talk right now because my son was still at the house. He was very adamant about it. And I was like, I really don't want to do this. And he just kept on. So I went upstairs. My son was asleep downstairs. And, he's saying all these things. And I told him that I thought, because he was living with us, and I told him that I thought he should move out because he needed to focus on himself. Because again, he was Prince Charming. He really was. He was a great, like, my son really experienced an amazing father figure, right? Like, when it was great, it was amazing. Okay. So I say that to say, I think sometimes us as humans, this is for men and women, sometimes we get so showered with the good that we tend to turn a blind eye to the small bad, but those small bads can be detrimental to your future.
Yeah, and they can
And
grow.
that part. And I believe that that's truly what happened through this process with him, is that I saw things very early on. But again, this is the double-edged sword about me, is I see the best in everybody, and I want to like be there with people to help them get to where they want to go. But like I even tell my clients, I can give you the steps to take, but I can't tell your feet to move. I can help you get there, but I can't make you get there. So, I was telling him that I thought he should move out, and he had never really been in a relationship like this, like where this was all new to him, living with somebody, and all. He's like, please just be patient with me. And I'm like, it's been a while. Like, how much patience does one have? And he was like, please, he begged, and he was like, I really had this great dinner planned tonight. I had asked him, I said, I have a question for you. Have you found a counselor yet? And he said, no. I said, have you even made a telephone call to try to get one? And he said, no. I said, honestly, that was going to be my hard line, that I was done. I said, because you've already admitted to yourself that you need help, but you're not willing to get it. I was like, I've come too far in my healing journey to go backwards. But I told him, I was like, I can love you through yours, but not at the risk of me losing mine and going backwards. And again, he begged and begged. And this is the part where in my grieving stage, I still to this day look back but again, I have a big heart. And sometimes me having such a big heart ends up hurting me in the end. But he begged and I said yes. But I said, if anything else happens, like I'm done. We can't, because it turned into kind of like a vicious little cycle of these little moments. It wasn't bad all the time, but when these little things happened, it was really bad. So get the sitter. We go out, we have a great dinner, evening, everything, and we were getting ready to leave. And he was like, are you ready to go? We had went to dinner, to the bar, this rooftop, everything, it was just a really great evening. But throughout the evening, we had conversation about like, hey, we have to be able to communicate with each other, and talking about like, hey, here's what we got to be able to do with one another to grow. But, we were drinking, we Ubered downtown, and we went to leave, and we were, I believe it's 5th and Broadway. And we had walked over there because he was looking for the Uber, and we get on the corner, and I was like, well, there's an Uber and a Lyft right here. And he was like, well, no, we got to get this one. We got to wait on this one. I said, okay, well, I'm just going to go sit down because my feet hurt, which is like really just the length of a sidewalk, right? But he says, okay. And again, it's been a great night. And I turn around and I just literally take a few steps there, and I turn around and he's gone. I can't see him anywhere. And it's like probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, maybe 1:30 in the morning, downtown Nashville. I have on heels, a dress, like everything, like skirt. nowhere to be found. And I text him and I'm like, where are you? You know, like, I just went to sit down and I can't find him anywhere. And I call and call and call. And he had lost my driver's license that night. And I didn't take my wallet. He told me not to take it, that he was, you know, treating me that night. So I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? You know, like, everybody's drunk down there. Being a female, being down there alone, I'm not going to lie, I was getting afraid, you know, just being a woman just sitting downtown in the middle of all these people. So I walk over to this cab and I asked them, like, about, like, getting home. And I told him I didn't have a wallet. He's like, well, it'll be $150 and I need the payment, blah, 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 blah. I didn't, I'm not going to lie, at the moment, between drinking and just my emotions, like being terrified, I didn't think about, like, Cash App or Zelle or any of that, or Venmo, or even the Uber app. I don't even have an Uber app because I normally I don't drink and drive. I just drive. And I was like, I can't do that. Again, I'm still calling and he's just not answering. Well, I know what I'm about to say. The world can come at me, okay? But know that I know that it's not the smartest thing to do, but it was odd hours in the morning. I didn't think about picking up a phone and calling a friend because all my friends, most of them are in relationships with kids and everything. Didn't think about it. But I saw this truck with two younger guys in it, right? And I just went over and asked them which direction they were going and if they could get me home, right? And it was like an extended cab truck. And they're like, yeah. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I was just drawn to them. It felt safe. By the end of the night, they were a very safe choice, right? Because Lord knows that could have ended differently. But they had an extended cab truck, and I open up the back of the door and I get in, and I can't remember if I was even able to close the door all the way or not. But then Prince Charming jumps in the back seat of the truck, and it's like, where did you come from? And he was like, are you an Uber driver? Are you a driver? And he was like, no. He's like, oh, so you're just going to jump in the truck with some random guys, right? And he jumps out. And I'm like, but where were you? And he said that he was across the street, up the street and around the corner looking for the car, his Uber that he ordered. But I'm like, I called you. You didn't answer. And he, like, storms off screaming, yelling. Like, at this point, I'm terrified, right? Because I've never heard him yell. Like, there was only one other time the whole time we were together, he even kind of raised his voice. And even at that time, I was like, you can get out. You're not going to talk to me like that. Like, I have a zero tolerance for how, like, I know my worth. I know
What
how to
were
be
these
treated.
boys doing? Were these boys scared?
You could tell that they were like, oh my God, what is happening? Right. But when he stormed off, I turned around and they were like, we'll get you home. Just come on. Right. Like, the guys, like, at that point, these guys knew, like, she's in some crap because they saw how he reacted. So they dropped the one friend off, and the nice, he was such a nice young man. Like, he stopped at a grocery store so I could use the restroom. He even bought me a Sprite, you know, but I didn't give him my address. I just put my address in my maps in my phone, and I gave him my phone so he could know how to get there. And so I didn't have my phone and I didn't have my Apple Watch on that night. I get home. He doesn't even pull in my driveway. Again, very respectful young man. I'm walking up the driveway and you could see on the cameras on my house that I'm walking up the driveway and Prince Charming comes around from the front of my house from the dark and, like, startles me because I didn't even know he was there. Like, I dropped my clutch and everything. And I remember going in the house and I walk in. I knew my wallet was right by the door and I get my money. I go back out there. I tell him thank you. And I think it was like 1:46 or 1:48 in the morning because I have security systems on my house, so I could tell when the doors were opened. And so that time for me to go in, pick up the money, go back up there. And then when I came in, I took my shoes off when I got in the house. And then I walked in the bedroom and there was stuff being thrown on the bed. And I remember walking through the bathroom and he was just carrying tons of stuff. And he was just like, I don't even remember what he said, to be 100% honest. I don't remember what he said. I just remember my response was, I'm just going to bed. Because you remember that conversation that I had that morning, I was just like, I can't do this, right? Like, my mental health is protected at all costs. You know, I was like, I'm just going to bed. So I remember, you know, taking off my jewelry, putting on my pajamas. And again, he's just throwing all this stuff on the bed. And he was taking some stuff outside. And I just turn off the bedroom light and I pick up the covers and I get in the bed. He came back in the house and I remember him coming in the bedroom and it was rage. Like, it was just rage and anger. And it was absolutely fucking terrifying. because he, like, the voice, like, I've never heard this voice. He was just screaming, and he just starts picking, because things had fallen off the bed from where I'd gotten in the bed under the covers. He just starts picking up everything and slinging it and throwing it. And I'm like, and I sit up because, again, I was laying down to go to sleep. And I'm like, Prince Charming, just stop, just stop, just stop. What are you doing? You know? And then I literally, even though the lights were off, because there were other lights in other parts of the house, I literally remember seeing him do like this, like a baseball pitcher. And whenever he did, like, my head just went back, and like, it felt like a brick hit me. At that point, I just feel all this water going down my face. So that's what it felt like. And I was just like, fuck this. I'm calling the police. And he said, fine, I'll leave my gun right here on the dresser until they get here. So not only that, and then I later found out that the gun was loaded and one in the chamber. So there was that. I did not know he had a loaded gun with one in the chamber just sitting around my house. So that was unsettling too. I knew he had a gun, but I didn't know it was loaded and all that stuff. And I had just found out about the gun that night before.
Did you, at this point before he hit you, did you realize, did it register with you that this was abusive? It was mentally abusive, all the things he did to you, from leaving you downtown to showing back up at your house, to the fact that you said, I'm going to bed. It's almost like you're not feeding into the energy that he wanted. At this point, did you recognize that this is abusive?
That night I did not. And, I've said this before, like, I have like a whole, for me, like, love is blind type thing. And, people usually try to take the quote, love is blind, as a positive thing. I don't. I was very blind because I'm very self-aware now.
This is normal, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
for someone that is in an abusive situation, for them to not recognize that that's why abuse is so powerful, because we don't recognize it when we're in the midst of it. You don't know it until you get out. It's like you have blinders on. And then when you get out of it, then you can start to see, the fog starts to clear. So I just want to kind of reiterate that for people that are listening, because if someone's in that situation right now, if you get the first inkling that it could be abusive, and that's why you and I are sitting here talking, is so that we can raise awareness around a very difficult topic that's so dangerous. He lays this gun beside you, and there's like, with no consideration, your son was he in the house? Was your son there?
No, he spent the night with a friend, or I would have ended up in jail that night. That would have been a whole different scenario.
Just, it's so much for me to like sit and hear these stories, because I know the manipulation that happens to get someone to a place where they can't even recognize it. And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. If something's not sitting right in your gut, something's not right. So figure out what's not right. Anyway, so he hit you. You call the police?
I did. I'm on the phone with them. They're asking me where he is, and he had went out the front door at that time. And they asked me if I could safely get out the back door. So I had to stay on the phone with them until the police got there. And the crazy part is, I think I called the police at 1:58. So less than 10 minutes, all of that happened. So there was that too. Like, it escalated quickly.
Was this the first time that he was physically abusive with you?
First and last. I had even told my friends, and this wasn't like the remorse of going, oh my God, I love him, I'm going to go back to him. This was just a human remorse, right? Like, I truthfully didn't believe that he knew what he did, or that he was aware of what he did, because I knew him well enough that if he would have known that I looked like I did with my face busted open, that his immediate response, like, I know him so well, he would have been like, what the fuck did I do? But the lights were off. I'm not saying that it's okay, because he did throw things at me, and when you throw things, it's with the intent to hit. So, but even in the police report, it said that he wasn't aware that I was bleeding and all the things. So I don't even think he really knew what he did until I went to court and I had pictures.
Well, we do have to say, like, it could have been much worse. Abusive situations, it's like they start and they can't stop. So the fact that he did it and stopped, not that it makes it right, but thank God that was all that he did, because the gun laying there loaded, it could have been much, much worse.
100%. 100%. And I advocate for this, and it's not saying that, because obviously my gut intuition told me that morning to get out, right? Like it's just, and I didn't, right? Like how you were saying, listen to that gut feeling. I had that gut feeling a lot, but again, the blinders were on. I justified staying, right? I justified helping him. I justified him being human. But that was really hard for my grieving is like that day I told him to get out and I should have just stood my ground. But I advocate also that if you are in a situation where this happens, like actually happens, not just the gut feeling, immediately do something.
Mhm.
Immediately. Because the way things were cleaned up before the police got here, because like other than the blood being all over the bed and the floors, everything he was slinging and throwing and everything, it looked like a perfectly clean room, except the covers folded back where I was in the bed. So if the blood would not have been there, they wouldn't have thought anything happened. So like it's questionable if he's done something like this before, but I just may be the only person that's actually called somebody about it because his last relationship before me, he would never talk to me about it. I didn't know who it was. You know, you just kind of want to know like what happened in your past relationships. Um, but I can say that the past relationship, the time frame that he was with that person was the exact same time frame that he was with me. So it's, you know, we'll never know. But again, the way he handled the situation that night and just getting everything out, it just makes you wonder like, is this somebody who's done this before? And that's what really, for multiple reasons, gives me the strength and even within my emotion of doing it to speak about it because I don't think enough women or people, men, whoever, know that they're not alone when things like this happen. Because when I did tell a few people about this, like so many women have been through this and men. And it's just like, you know, they teach you these things growing up about how to like stop, drop, and roll if there's a fire, you know, and it's like, unfortunately, I've really truly believed that people need to be aware of like how to handle mental abuse before it becomes physical. But even if it becomes physical, like you immediately stop it. You know, even my son did say something about me forgiving him. And I told him, I said, I've already forgiven him because I explained to my son that forgiveness is for me, not for them. You know, my son missed him. And I was like, baby, I can't go back. And he was like, but he just drank too much ginger ale and made a bad decision, you know? And my son has had to learn at a very young age that majority of the time when somebody makes that first bad decision, that every time that bad decision gets a little bit worse every single time, sometimes ending fatally, you know?
Right.
And it's like, and I told him, I was like, I love you too much and I love me too much that, you know, and I do love that person, right? Like I'm that person that once I love a person, I'm always going to love them. But, you know, like I'm going to love them from afar. You know, they're human. I pray every day that this heals and helps him become a better person. At the same time, there is a healing and hurting journey that me and my son are going through. Is something, oh gosh, I'm going to tear up saying that because, like, from a very young age, I started dealing with trauma from being raped by my mom's boyfriend when I was like in the first and second grade. So I've always been so protective over my son to protect him from trauma. And it's so crazy because right around he's in the second grade and now he's going through this first trauma, but I'm handling it differently than what it was handled when I was a child. I was taught as a child that things happen. This is life. It's not okay, but just put it in your pocket and slap a smile on your face and make your life the best life. And I never was taught how to grieve and understand what happened. I truly believe that made me more vulnerable to instances happening sometimes because, you know, I just want to make people happy. I know what it feels like to hurt. And that's why I try to be everybody's sunshine, right? Afterwards, I immediately sought therapy for my son and myself. And my first therapist I saw, which kudos to them for being so blunt, but she talked to me for a while and she said, I don't think I can help you. And I'm like, oh. And she said, have you ever been evaluated for PTSD? And I told her no. And she said that she really recommended me to be, because again, I'm such a happy person and my life is my life. So I just think this is normal life, right? She said, Sabrina, I really think you need to speak to somebody who specializes in PTSD.
Mm.
And sure enough, I reached out to a different counselor, and they did some evaluations, and I fit the spectrum for it. And the crazy part is that there's something called EMDR therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and I could give you the term. It doesn't make sense, but what it is it makes you go deep down in that very dark place of yourself
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't even know existed, because you've subconsciously packed away the things that have hurt you so bad in your life. And it makes you open it up, and it makes you pull it all out. Not all at once. It's very small, but they give you skills to be able to process them, because those things that we tend to tuck away in a very dark place just to act like they never happened because you just want to move on. If you don't understand them and heal from them, they'll hurt you even worse in the future. Go ahead.
I think of trauma, it's like a wound that you have. And it's like that wound, if you have infection in there, you can put a band-aid over it and pretend like that infection's not there. And you can even have skin and stuff grow back over it. But eventually that infection is gonna come out. It's gonna cause more of a problem. And the brain is such an interesting thing. And the more that I do this podcast and different specialists and people I talk to, it's like the brain is so amazing because it's like kind of compartmentalizes this thing because we're not strong enough in that moment to handle it. But that thing was never meant to be put and never confronted either. It's just like a wound, like the first thing is like getting control of the wound, and then you have to remove the infection. That type of trauma is never meant for a human being to carry. And unfortunately, I think what happens, even in the case of your ex, people that are abusive, there's something that has happened, I believe, that causes them to respond and react this way. Some unresolved feelings that they're not able to confront, whether it's abandonment or whether it's whatever the case is. Each person is faced with this decision. I was just having this conversation with my son this morning. Like, life is amazing because we have the opportunity to make decisions. We can't control what other people do to us, but we can decide how we're going to respond to that thing. So in your case, you can't control that the man hit you, but you can control the fact that this will be the first and last time that this ever happens. It's an amazing journey to be able to know that we have that power to make a decision and literally change the trajectory of our lives. And I want to just say this as well, like as an individual, we have our own toxicity, our own issues, our own infection, things we have to deal with on our own. When you bring another person in, they also have carrying their own toxicities. Now, if you have two people that want to try to make things work, like going back to your situation, if he wanted to make things work, he would have gone to counseling. He would have tried to heal himself from these things. But when you have someone who doesn't want to heal, you have no choice. You do have a choice. You have a choice to stay in a toxic situation, or you have the choice to leave.
I didn't blame I went through all stages of grief. So yes, I did blame myself sometimes. I don't blame myself now. Like, when I tell you it was one hell of a grief roller coaster, there were emotions I felt that I don't even know the name to them because I don't even know if they really exist, but I felt them. But I did say that the next day, is that I think because I had given him that hard line of, if anything happens again, I'm done. And I've said that. I said, I think that once I got home that night, in his head, he's like, she's done with me. I've messed this up. I've lost her. Because, when we were good, we were great. And I think that's what set him off in rage. It wasn't rage at me. It was rage at himself. And he was mad because he felt like he messed up, like he just broke everything. But it came out at me.
Which is an important thing here. Like, as human beings, we have to learn how to control our emotions. And I've heard it said that, like, if you can control your emotions, you're a very powerful person. Because that kind of thing, if you let those little things push you into rage or even into where you kind of black out and you're doing things that you don't recognize, you're dangerous. Not only are you dangerous, but then you're also going to ruin every good thing that is happening in your life. And I think that's what he did. And you're right. I'm sure we can't get into his mind, and he's definitely not here to defend himself. But I would just say, as an empath, and after spending time with you, I believe you truly are an empath, and I'm an empath, and I always want to figure out people because I want to learn how to help people in the best way, but also put boundaries up to protect myself and my heart, because being an empath, you do feel a lot of things. And it's it's a it's a blessing, I feel like, because it's a gift that we have to be an empath, but it's also, you have to learn, it's just like a superpower. We have to learn how to channel that and use it for good and not let it destroy us.
Speaking of being an empath, that was another reason that I couldn't really tell many people what was going on, because my bandwidth, along with everything else at that moment, was broken, right? Like I barely had, but I still had to show up and be a mom. I still had to be that superhero to be a mom. So above anything, even though in all my brokenness, the pain, the hurt, the everything, I still had to be a mom. Like through this journey, since this has happened, I will always find the light in the darkest room. I will, even if I can't find it, I'll be it. And I've always said that to myself. But I didn't find it for a really long time with this. I was dealing with depression and anxiety that was so bad. I couldn't go to the gym, which I know that sounds crazy, but the gym is really my mental oasis, to where I go in and I can just process emotions, but I couldn't be in there. The loud noises, the people looking at me, if anybody even come up and touched my elbow, like it would send my anxiety through the roof, but
Mhm.
nobody knew that. So it's not like they were intentionally doing it. But with the bandwidth thing, this journey right here, because I'm that person that I will pour, pour, pour until I run myself dry, and I will figure out how to refill, because I truly believe, like, just love people like God loved people, be their hands and feet, just love them through it. But I can honestly say, I think this is really the first time in my life that I went, I can't do it. I can't. And I had to cut off, like, I didn't have some my closest friends that did know about this. Like, I have a few that was really there, like they physically were here to help me, like the day it happened. But we have this thing now, like recently, and they'll be like, "Hey, I want to call and say something, but how's your bandwidth?" Right? That's a common phrase between me and a few of my friends now. Like, "How's your bandwidth? Can you take this right now?" Because of me being an empath, friends will want to call and talk about like positive things, just like, oh, my son and awards and sports, or like people with their relationships. And I'm like, I can't, like good or bad. Like my emotional bandwidth literally couldn't take any of it. And some of them were really hard conversations with people, but the people who truly care, my brother being one of them, I told him, I was like, I don't have the bandwidth for this. And, I told him some things, and later on he said, I really respect you and I love our relationship because you can be honest with me. And I think that as a society now, we get so worried about making somebody mad or hurting somebody else's feelings that we tend to sweep our own behind us and not think of ourselves first. And I can say this whole situation has made me more aware of how far I used to put myself back to put somebody else forward. And I'm not going to do that anymore. Or at least I'm working on not doing it, because honestly, I'm human. I'm an empath. I am who I am. People be like, you haven't responded to a text. I'm like, I just haven't gotten to it. Because again, a lot of this, especially right now, since I have opened up about this, I again am being very aware of my emotional bandwidth. The day that I posted the video that came out about it, I literally posted it and I put my phone on do not disturb for 2 hours, because it took a lot of my emotional bandwidth, and it was hard. Because if anybody thinks that I was just like, "Ooh, I'm going to go talk about this," no, no. But again, if I can't find the light in the dark, I'll be the light. And my whole hope for this is that I can be the light for somebody else when they can't see it for themselves.
And I think that what you're describing, that area of being able to like, or not being able to handle other people. I felt this a lot. I can relate to what you're saying. I felt this a lot when I went through my divorce. I didn't have the capacity either. If someone called me with drama, I definitely didn't have the capacity. But I honestly was the same. I didn't really, I couldn't hear. I was doing everything I could do to keep myself together, keep my kids healthy, keep my mind in a good place. Like it's very hard. And sometimes I believe everything we go through in life, there's positive in it. We have to find the positive. It's very negative situations, but we grow from it, right? So there's always something. And I believe that the positive in that desolate time where there's like nothing and you have to remove yourself, when you read the Bible, you hear of like God growing people through the desolate times. He took the children of Israel into the desert for what, 40 years? These desolate periods, there's growth there. And sometimes when we go through like the worst of situations, God will have to, He has to prepare us for the growth He's getting ready to do. And He can't, it's like going back to the children of Israel. Like He had to leave them in the desert for 40 years so that He could then grow them to what He created them to be or whatever. So it's like we have to, I think we have to see that in our own individual walks as well. And this is why, even honestly, like even when I look back at the photos that you and I did, there's the one where you're standing and everything looks like desolate behind you. And I'm like, that picture, like, I'll be honest, like the sun was coming in bright and it was hard to get the exposure right on that photo. But I feel like that speaks volumes because that is exactly what it's like, what has to happen. And it's like all of everything breaks apart so that we can rebuild it up bigger and better and more powerful. And there's no doubt in my mind that God is using you in this situation. You are literally taking your pain and turning it to power. You're taking your trauma and turning it to triumph. And it's such a it's a hard journey, but it's also a beautiful journey because you're taking the one thing that was meant to break you apart and you're using it for strength, for power, for empowerment, for helping other people, and it's a beautiful thing.
When I started the EMDR therapy, she realized that one of my biggest things that I was dealing with is that I had lost power. Because I did. It's like everything that was happening to me was affecting every aspect of my life, and I had no control over it. One of the worst feelings I've ever felt in my life is for something to happen to me. And, going through the therapy and everything, and even getting down to me doing this, I couldn't talk about it because it hurt. Like for me to heal, I couldn't talk about it with many people. But, releasing this just, within the past couple of weeks or here recently, again, being emotionally intellectual, like with where you're at is super important with something like this because therapy's been going great. And she was like, so where does this leave us? And I told her, I said, I'm ready to heal by helping others. So I told her, I was like, so give me a couple weeks because I need to see how I'm going to be after I do this. I was like, but I really think I'm to a place of my own healing that I'm not healed. Like if I'm going to be 100% honest, I don't think I will ever heal 100% from this. I think there will always be something that creeps back up, but I'm going to be more sound mind about it and aware of it, that I know it's still sitting there. It's not going to get tucked away in that pocket. When I tell you, when that video released, somebody asked me how I felt and if it was hard. I said, it might have been one of the hardest things I've ever done. I said, but it feels like the elephant's off my chest now. I feel like I can breathe because life happens to us. And yes, we have choices of how we respond. And I'm not saying that every person has to do this because every person processes their grief and everything in different ways. But for me personally, me hiding it from the world held me down and it hurt me. And not just the world, but people close to me, friends, people like, because everybody knows I frequent the gym. I'm there just as much as home, and those people love me and care about me, but they had no idea what was going on. And I don't lie, but sometimes I feel like withholding information is just as bad as a lie. So I felt like I was lying to their face, but people would ask me, like, are you okay? I never lied to them. I would either say I will be or I'm resilient. So they knew something, but just like me being able to talk about it freely makes me not feel ashamed about it, because I feel like you hide things you're ashamed of, and that's okay. I was ashamed, but I'm not now. And some people may still be, and that's okay. But, because every person has this own grieving process and everybody's situation is different. Some, there's different levels to this. And it's just, I just encourage people that however they need to process it for them as an individual to do it, but to know that there's help out there. Because that was a really scary thing to me, was just to get these 1-800 numbers and them, me calling them like, well, you need a safe place. You need a safe place that's in walking distance, one that's in driving. You need to have an emergency bag packed. Like, that stuff broke me even more to hear that. Like, what the hell did I do to my life to be in the situation? But at that time, I didn't know that I had friends that had been through a similar situation, that I could have picked up the phone, that could have sympathized with me and empathized with me. So that's why I share my story, and that I say my DMs are always open, is, I'm not a fixer of things, but what I can be is an ear and support to help you get to wherever you need to go, and just to let you know that you're not alone.
That's so beautiful. That is like my heart behind even starting this podcast is like, I just hope that people can find that person that can relate to them and their type of trauma, and know that they're not alone, and know that that there are people there that are willing to help and do really understand, because that's a really scary and not a good place to be, to feel alone and like no one understands what you're going through, and to not know what to do. That's hard too. And people that are in that situation, going back to not realizing it, you just know that you're miserable and it's not a good place to be, but